Hey guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. Now, in today's video, guys, I'm going to be doing a full review on the newest installment in the Sony Spider-Man Universe, Madam Web. Now, before I get onto this review, make sure you guys go check out the community post. I just put up a poll on there not too long ago asking if you guys wanted to see a list of my favorite movies of all time, and I'm going to be doing a few more polls like this within the next couple days, so make sure you guys are checking up on that. Make sure you guys are voting on that if you haven't yet. And I just want try out some different ideas for videos. If you, as always, if you guys have suggestions, let me know. But haven't really had a whole lot to do in my free time. Been pretty bored with a lot of video games and whatnot, and so figured try to get some more content out for you guys to fill up that that space. And take that with a grain of salt because I'm really bad at making promises when it comes to YouTube. But yeah, that's what I kind of want to be doing. This year already is looking to be a lot more sporadic as far as movies go than last year. Even though January and February are generally slower months, I can definitely tell that there's not going to be as many movies coming out as with last year. And so it's going to be pretty difficult to beat my last year's record. I'm trying to find one more movie to watch for this month, but haven't really found anything that has piqued my interest too much. I thought about the Bob Marley movie, but now I'm kind of straying away from that, so I'll keep you guys updated on that. But there is picking up a little traction coming next month, so make sure you guys stay tuned for the regular reviews. Otherwise, I'm going to be trying to get those rankings out for you, so make sure you are voting so that you can get some different content out there, and let me know of any suggestions. Moving on to the review itself here. Now, you're probably anticipating me to just crap on this movie for the rest of the video, but I genuinely wanted to find at least a few good things to say about this movie here. I didn't want to just make a full video just crapping on Madam Web. You've probably already seen a ton of other reviews just dogpiling on Madam Web, pretty much. And I didn't really want to do that. It obviously took me a while to get around to doing this video. The movie came out almost a week ago now. And so I just didn't want to do that. I did want to find some good things to talk about here and just go in understanding that when we do get onto the negatives, that I'm not carrying out my frustration on the writers, the actors, the actresses. I understand they go through a lot of restrictions, a lot of rewrites, reshoots, and by the time the final product comes out, it's nowhere near what the original ideas were from the writers that they hire from these bigger studios. A lot of my frustration here is going on Sony because they made a lot of inexcusable mistakes. And I think a lot of more people are opening up to that and understanding that. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. So first positive for this movie, I think that the overall casting selection here is pretty good. I think that Dakota Johnson was not a bad choice for Madam Web, and I think that there was a legitimate good story arc that they could have had for her character that unfortunately gets lost within the complete mess that this movie is. I think that, the exposition kind of shows that with her mom, who's this field researcher who dies at the beginning of this movie. She loses both of her parents very early on, and you can see how that has affected her. She doesn't make a big deal out of it and doesn't realize how big of a deal that really is. And they do they do a little bit at kind of pointing that out in a particular scene in this movie. And I can see where they were trying to tie that in with the kids or the teenagers that she takes care of in this movie, who also either don't have parents or they're not around or anything like that. So there was a legitimate story arc that I think that they were trying to tie in with our main character and the teenage Spider-Man girls that were in this movie as well. But like I said, just gets completely lost within 20 to 20 minutes into this movie. So unfortunate, but I think that Dakota Johnson was actually a pretty good choice here. Also are the girls who play the teenage Spider-Mans in this movie, Sydney Sweeney and the other two that I'm not very familiar with. I think they weren't bad. Adam Scott, for the little bit that we get of him here, I think is a decent comedic relief when we're actually laughing with the movie and not at the movie. And I think that our main villain here, with how much injustice he was dealt in this movie and all the problems that I have with him, I think that there was definitely some potential from him. So a lot of acting potential here, but as I'll talk about later, so much of it is just held back in this movie. Two positives for this movie, both of which I felt like I had to point out because there's such a huge thing with comic book films lately, and that is, first one being that they didn't screw up on the CGI or the visual effects. So great job, Madam Web. That was a bit of an issue with Morbius, with like some of the dark colors being mixed together, and so it didn't contrast very well in some of those action sequences. Similar thing with Venom as well. But it just seems like it's been a thing lately where big budget comic book films. Now I know Madam Web, not as big of a budget as them. I think it was close to 100 million, which this is going to be yet again one of the biggest, or if not the biggest, box office failure by a comic book film ever. I feel like I've said that 5 times within the past year. But at least they didn't screw up on the visual effects and the CGI. So, but it mainly just had to do with the fact that they didn't have a lot of action sequences to begin with. So there was not really any room for them to screw up here. Last thing, another thing I felt like I had to bring up is there's no post-credit scene for this movie, which I was actually quite relieved about, because at the ending of this movie, turned to my friend who I was watching this movie with, and I said, hey, is there a post-credits? And he said no, and I'm like, good, I'm out. And so that did, I did appreciate that. I appreciate that they weren't going to try to be like Morbius and like make a little teaser at the end or whatever. And they were just like, nope, we're getting this movie out and we're going to be done with it. So yeah, that's honestly all I could ask for from a movie nowadays, because it's not just comic book movies anymore. It's just every single movie needs a post-credit scene for whatever reason. Movie held back on that, and that's probably the greatest compliment that I have for this movie. That's all I got for the positives. Let's move on to the negatives here. First things first, and I'm sure you've heard it from other people who have reviewed this movie. The dialogue here is very, very bad, and it is what shows kind of the lack of care and willingness to be involved with this movie that I can feel from the actors and actresses. It just really felt like nobody involved with this movie wanted to be there. And it shows even more when you watch some of the interviews of Dakota Johnson. You can just tell she's not taking this seriously at all. So it just felt like there's just at some points in the movie, the dialogue is so bad that it just feels like it's making a parody of itself. The movie legitimately feels like a spoof, but instead of the characters having kind of a fun time joking around, they don't want to be there. The scene's so awkward because they just don't want to be there in the first place. So dialogue very, very bad, particularly with our villain here, who every time he's on screen, it sounds like he's narrating in the background rather than talking on screen, if that makes sense. Because when he is facing towards the camera, what he's saying is never in sync with his lips. And then when he's turning away from it, it's very obvious that he's not actually talking on screen, and it's just him narrating in the background. Second negative that I have for this movie, and this is an issue with a lot of the other Sony Spider-Man Universe movies, particularly the ones where they take a villain of Spider-Man and make a sort of anti-hero story out of them, is obviously Sony has the Spider-Man IP. They have the licensing to it. They have the full rights to use it, but they never use their greatest asset in their movies. And it boggles me how this is an issue when they're putting out movies like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man No Way Home to a certain degree, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, all very, very great films. And then you have piles of dog crap like Morbius coming out, and then Madam Web here, where we're just merely toying around with ideas in this movie and not even carrying them out at all. This movie is not an action film at all. You know, most comic book films fall under kind of the action category. They have action scenes in it. This movie has not enough action sequences to classify as that. It's not a comic book film. It just toys around with ideas. And I don't know, just so much of this movie is spent meandering around and just toying around with the mere idea of having Spider-Man in its universe. And I don't know what's the best way. I guess the best way to explain that to you is this movie's idea of having Spider-Man in its universe and including it in its universe, and I guess sort of doing a cameo of him, is they have this entire scene where Adam Scott is Ben Parker in this movie, and his wife is Emma Roberts, and she has a baby shower, and they're playing, oh, guess the baby, guess the name of the baby, and it's like, us as viewers, we all know who it is. It's Peter Parker, and they just toy around with that for 2 minutes. or 2 to 3 minutes. And it's like, that's your idea of including Spider-Man into your movie that is a part of the Spider-Man universe? You could be using your greatest asset, including him in the movie. I get he's not born yet by this time in the movie, but however, there's how many other variations of Spider-Man? The closest this movie gets to including Spider-Man into its universe is that our main villain's costume looks a lot like Spider-Man's. It's like a black suit. It's got red, like a red outline of the eyes. But otherwise, our main characters here, Madam Web, doesn't wear her full comic book outfit until the very ending of the movie, which I think looked really bad. And then our teenage Spider-Man's in here. If you watch the trailer and you're thinking, oh, like they got the outfits on or whatever from the comics, that is literally a 60-second part of this movie. That is a premonition. It's not even an actual part of the movie. It's just a premonition from Madam Web of them being in their suits. Otherwise, everybody else is just in their regular outfits, just regular clothing throughout the entire movie. It's so bad. This movie, it just toys with the idea of being a part of a comic book universe. And it's not a comic book movie. It's, like I said, not a comic book movie, not an action movie. It just likes to meander around and throw around its IP like it's like some gem that they can't open up or something like that. It's just so weird. The beginning of this movie, like I said, seemed like it could have been going in a good direction, although the dialogue was still really bad. Then gets completely lost in the middle, where we have our main character. She finds the teenager. She takes them to the woods. She leaves them. She comes back. They're in a different spot. She leaves them again. That's like an hour of this movie just spent doing that. And then the last 15 minutes of this movie is where our main character finally figures out to fully control her psychic powers and help out her teenagers who she's been taking care of throughout the entire movie a little bit. And that's it. She never really fights our main villain in this movie. And there's maybe one action sequence. It's more of a chase sequence in the middle of the film that's like on the subway station or whatever. I'm sure you saw it in the trailer. And that's pretty much all this movie is. And then we have these scenes with our villain where he's explaining his motivations that don't make any sense. That's another negative I have for here is our villain is quite possibly one of the worst comic book villains ever with his motivations. I don't get it at all. His whole thing is that the Madam Web's mom, who's this field researcher, right? She finds the spider that has these powers that she is going to try to use to make a cure or whatever, and our villain's like, no, I can't let you do that because I can see in the future and I can see that that these teenage Spider-Man are gonna do something to me or whatever, and so I can't let you take this spider so that you can create this cure or whatever. That, like, what? I don't understand. This movie just meanders along and just toys around with IP with its IP and just doesn't carry out anything. It just messes around for an hour and 20 minutes, and the other 20-25 minutes are with our little exposition at the beginning, and then that final scene that I was talking about earlier. It's, I don't know. You'd have to watch the movie to fully understand what I'm saying, but don't waste your time watching this movie. Last thing I wanted to throw out here, this movie for some reason really likes to enhance, for some reason. In just random scenes throughout the movie, it will just zoom in for no reason, not even for dramatic effect. The character could just be standing still, laying on the ground, whatever it is, and it'll just zoom in randomly. By the time I was like halfway through this movie, I was just like waiting for it to happen, like anticipating for it to happen. And then every time it happened, I was be like, what the hell are we doing here? This movie is literally a parody. It's a spoof. It's like a complete mess of just having the Spider-Man IP, not really doing anything, carrying it around like it's some golden gem that they can't drop or whatever, that they can't open up. And this is not a comic book film. This is not an action film. This is just messing around with the Spider-Man concept and not carrying out anything. Barely using our main character's psychic powers. She doesn't have control of them throughout much of this movie. Our villain's motivations suck. They don't make any sense. We don't fight our villain at all throughout this movie. Nobody's ever in their comic book costumes. This movie just has ideas and it doesn't carry them out at all. At least Morbius was number one, memeable, and number two, at least it had some decent like action sequences, and we actually got to see our character like come into full form and like do what he's supposed to do. And Madam Web, like we have the characters, we have Madam Web, but she never becomes Madam Web really. So I don't know. Like I said, I could go on all day complaining about this movie, and talking about some of the laughably bad scenes in here, but don't go watch this movie. Don't go waste your time with it. I can do my best trying to describe to you how bad this is, but do not ever go watch this movie. Do not waste your time. The only reason I did this is because I'm a reviewer, and I'm sure you are already knowing that this movie is going to be bad anyway, so it doesn't even make sense for me to go watch it, but I did it because it's another video to add to my list, I suppose. But do not go watch this movie. I'm going insane talking about it. My rating, I believe I gave it like a 1.5 out of 5 stars on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as Letterboxd. You can see my reviews on there if you follow my account on there, rs_horror. But I gave it like a 1.5 out of 5 stars. There's just very little entertainment value here, a few action sequences. So I'd give it like a 3 out of 10 on that scale. And that's all I got. I'm done talking about this movie. I'm going to go crazy talking about it. So that's all I got. Make sure you guys are checking out the community posts and those polls that I was talking about. I'm going to be putting out a few more within the next couple of days. And hopefully we can get out some different rankings and videos for a change here within the next couple weeks. So that's all I got for you guys. Like and subscribe. Let me know of any suggestions in the comments below, and I will see you next time.